The turkey was still hot when she said it. I know it was hot because I'd been awake since 4 that morning. Not because I couldn't sleep. Because I chose not to. Chosen to stand in my apartment kitchen brining a 20-pound bird, while the rest of Millfield was still dreaming. I'd seasoned it 3 ways, rotated the pan every 40 minutes like a surgeon monitoring a patient, and driven the entire meal 25 minutes across town in my Honda, with the heat cranked so the mashed potatoes wouldn't stiffen in the cold November air. I carried 6 containers up those porch steps in 3 separate trips. Nobody opened the door for me. I set the table myself. Not paper napkins, but the cloth ones, the good set I'd given my mother 2 Thanksgivings before, the ones she only unfolded when guests came. I pressed them into little fans beside each plate. No one asked me to, no one noticed. Dinner was already halfway through when my mother, Linda, set down her fork, looked across the table at me the way you'd look at a receipt you didn't want to see, and said it. Clear as weather. No tremor, no hesitation. You've always been a burden, right from the start. My brother Garrett laughed. And I want to be precise here, it wasn't the awkward, cover-your-mouth laugh of someone who doesn't know what else to do. It was real laughter. Agreement laughter. The kind that feels like a second punch landing right after the first. At least some of us make this family proud, he said, reaching across the table with the fork I'd set and the napkin I'd folded. My father Frank looked at his plate. Just looked at it, like it was suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. I set my fork down on the left side of my plate, the side you put it when you're finished and not coming back. I folded my napkin once, placed it beside my plate, stood up, walked to the front door, lifted my gray wool coat from the hook, and stepped outside into the November cold. The door clicked shut behind me. Softly, deliberately. No argument, no scene, no slamming. Because here's what none of them knew as they sat there, eating the food I cooked in the house I'd been paying for. I'd been financing that roof over their heads for 8 years. And the silence I left behind me was about to become the loudest thing that ever happened to them. Welcome to Calm Drama Stories. My name is Sloan. I'm 32 years old, a licensed CPA living in a small Pennsylvania town called Millfield. What you're about to hear is the story of how my family used me as a financial safety net for nearly a decade, dismissed me at a holiday dinner table, and then discovered what happens when the net disappears. If this story lands somewhere familiar, if you've ever been the one quietly holding everything together while others took all the credit, stay with me. Drop a comment when you're done. And subscribe, because we're just getting started. I was 14 when I won the state mathematics competition. First place. A gold-toned trophy with my name engraved on a small brass plate at the base. I held it in my lap the entire bus ride home, careful not to let it rattle against the metal seat. When I pushed through our front door, the kitchen smelled like Gino's pepperoni pizza, 4 large pies, boxes stacked on the counter. I set the trophy down next to the boxes. Linda was cutting slices onto paper plates, glowing. Your brother made the JV football team, she said, not looking up. Backup safety. He worked so hard for this. Nobody looked at the trophy. Garrett, who was 17 and had finally cracked a roster he'd leave within 3 months after missing too many practices, got the pizza party. I got the side of the counter. The trophy sat there for 3 days before I moved it to my bedroom, the small one beside the laundry room, where the dryer hummed through the wall every night and the single window faced the neighbor's garage wall. Garrett's room was the biggest in the house. He had a television, a lock on his door, and my mother's complete and undivided attention. That same month, I heard Linda telling Mrs. Oates over the backyard fence that Garrett was going to earn an athletic scholarship to college. He didn't, he got cut from the team. I said nothing. I was learning something at 14 that most people don't learn until they're much older. Silence can be a weapon or a cage, and the difference is entirely in who holds it. I went to Penn State on an academic scholarship covering 70% of tuition. I worked 2 jobs for the rest, early mornings at the campus bookstore, weekends at a tax preparation office in town. I ate peanut butter sandwiches 4 nights a week and bought my work clothes from clearance racks. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in accounting and 0 debt. Garrett enrolled in community college, lasted one semester, decided it wasn't for him, and moved back into our NTS basement to build his business. The business was custom-printed t-shirts sold online. It lasted 4 months. The website is technically still live. 0 orders since 2017. When I was 24, 2 years into my first real accounting position, Linda called me. My father Frank had torn 3 ligaments in his lower back on a construction site. Workers' compensation covered the surgery. It didn't cover everything else. We need help with the bills, Sloan. I was making $36,000 a year. I started sending $800 a month. That was more than a quarter of my take-home pay. I ate ramen 5 nights a week. I skipped lunch. I hemmed my own work clothes. When I asked whether Garrett was contributing, Linda's voice flattened like a line going dead. Your brother is building something, you just have a job. That was the first check. I wrote it at my kitchen table in my studio apartment, sealed the envelope, walked it to the corner mailbox. Over the next 8 years, I would write 311 more. 8 years is a long time to be someone's balance sheet. By year 3, I'd been promoted to senior accountant at Harper & Webb, a small firm in downtown Millfield. By year 5, I'd passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, studying at night after full days of other people's taxes. By year 8, my salary had reached $58,000, and a freelance bookkeeping side business added another $15,000 on top. On paper, I was doing well. In reality, every single month, the same checks went out. $1,200 for the mortgage, $340 for Frank's health insurance supplement, $180 for utilities, property tax twice a year. Over 8 years, the running total came to just under $186,000. I know the exact number. I'm an accountant. I tracked every cent. Meanwhile, Garrett's resume read like an art exhibit of abandoned ambition. The t-shirt business. A cryptocurrency trading account that evaporated $8,000 of Linda's savings. A food truck concept that never made it past a hand-drawn sketch on his basement wall. A fourth venture, buying and flipping rural land, which existed only in theory, a YouTube video he'd watched, and a glossy business card reading Garrett Jurgen's Enterprises. His financial contribution to the household across those 8 years was not minimal, not reduced. It was precisely, completely zero. And Linda's story never changed. Garrett is going to make it big. Sloan just pushes numbers. In October, about 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, the church held its annual potluck. Linda had volunteered me to bring 2 pies, apple and pecan, without asking. I made them anyway. When I walked into the fellowship hall with both pies in hand, Linda was already holding court by the coffee station, with one hand resting on Garrett's shoulder like he was a trophy she was presenting. Pastor Juan, have you met my son? He's an entrepreneur working on something really exciting. Garrett produced a business card from his back pocket, embossed, glossy, for Garrett Jurgen's Enterprises. His latest venture, buying cheap rural lots and flipping them. He didn't mention there were no lots, no capital, and no plan beyond a 40-minute video he'd found online. Someone near the dessert table, I think it was Mrs. Danner, asked about me. Linda barely turned her head. Oh, Sloan, she does bookkeeping, she's fine. She said fine the way you describe, whether on a day no one will remember. I was standing 2 feet away, holding 2 pies I'd baked from scratch. I set them on the table, picked up my purse, walked out to the parking lot. Nobody noticed. I stopped at the Wawa on Route 30, bought a black coffee with 2 sugars, and sat in my car for 40 minutes. I wasn't crying. I wasn't spiraling. I was doing something I'd been doing my whole life without a name for it. Recalculating. Every few years, an accountant has to look at the books and ask an honest question. Is this long-term liability still worth carrying? A commitment that produces no return, no acknowledgement, no reciprocity. At what point does it become financial negligence to continue? I was starting to do that math. Thanksgiving morning, 5 a.m. I stood in my apartment kitchen with a 20-pound turkey I'd brined overnight in a 5-gallon bucket. I made everything from scratch. Real butter mashed potatoes. Green bean casserole with fresh mushrooms. Cranberry sauce from whole berries, simmered on the stove, because Linda once said the canned kind looked like hospital food. By 11, my car smelled like a restaurant. I drove to 814 Maple Drive, carried everything up the steps in 3 trips, let myself in with the key I'd held since college. Frank was in his recliner with a heating pad on his back, watching football on mute. Linda was getting ready. Garrett was asleep in the basement. I set the table, the counters, adjusted the thermostat. I could do that since I paid the electric bill, unfolded the cloth napkins into fans, checked the oven twice. At 2 in the afternoon, Garrett appeared in a hoodie and sweatpants, hair uncombed, and dropped into the chair I had just wiped clean. "When's dinner?" Linda materialized behind him, touched his shoulder. "Sit down, honey, you must be tired." He'd been asleep 90 seconds ago. Nobody said thank you, nobody asked if I needed help, nobody said anything to me at all. In accounting, when 2 numbers should match but don't, we call that unreconciled. The debit and credit both exist on the books, but something's off. Something's been off for so long the whole ledger has quietly become wrong. Standing in that kitchen, holding a serving spoon, watching my family gather around a meal I cooked, and a table I set in a house I paid for, I finally understood that word as something other than professional. Linda raised her glass of boxed wine. "I want to say how grateful I am for my Garrett. He makes this family so proud." Garrett dipped his head in practiced humility. "Thanks, Mom. Actually, I've been looking at some lots out past Route 9. Real estate is where the smart money is going." He said this while eating turkey I had roasted and sitting at a table, whose mortgage I had paid 437 times. Frank chewed quietly, eyes on his plate. Then Linda looked at me. "And Sloan, what do you have to be thankful for?" I opened my mouth. "You're just a burden," she said. "Always have been." Matter of fact, like mentioning the weather, like it was something everyone already knew but nobody had bothered to say out loud until now. Garrett laughed. Frank set down his fork, didn't look up, didn't speak, just stopped. I looked at the napkin in my lap, the one I had folded into a fan 2 hours ago. I set my fork on the left side of my plate. I folded the napkin once, exactly once, and placed it beside the dish. I pushed my chair back, stood up, walked to the front door, took my coat from the hook, the gray wool one, $12 at a Goodwill in Lancaster, and stepped outside. "Where are you going?" Linda's voice came from behind me, more annoyed than concerned. "Dinner isn't over." I pulled the door shut. Softly. Walked to my car in the dark. Drove home in total silence. No radio, no music, no tears. Just the road and the heater and the particular quiet of a decision being made. That was the last Thanksgiving I would ever spend in that house. 2 weeks later, I opened my banking app. 3 scheduled payments. $1,200 for the mortgage on the 1st of every month, $340 for Frank's health insurance on the 15th, $180 for utilities. 3 transfers, 3 taps. Confirm, confirm, confirm. It took less than a minute to end 8 years of automatic obligation. I closed the app and set my phone on the coffee table. For the first time since I was 24 years old, my checking account was going to stay exactly where it was at the end of the month. 12 days passed before the phone rang. "Frank." "Sloan, the bank sent a letter. There's a late payment notice, a penalty." His voice was careful, the tone of a man navigating someone else's terrain. "Why is the mortgage unpaid?" "Ask your pride and joy." Silence, a game show playing faintly in the background. "Sloan, you can't just." "I can, and I am." I hung up, lay back on my couch, stared at the ceiling of my 410-square-foot apartment. The lease had my name on it. The electricity was mine. The Wi-Fi, the renter's insurance, the doormat that said welcome, all mine. Every object in that room purchased with money I had earned. And for the first time in 8 years, none of it was going to Maple Drive. Linda's counterattack started 3 days later. She didn't call me, she called everyone else. Aunt Carol in Allentown, Cousin Bate in Scranton, Mrs. Danner from church, the cashier at the grocery store who'd known our family for 2 decades. The story was clean, rehearsed, and devastating in its simplicity. Sloan abandoned her family. Her father is disabled, her mother has no income. Sloan just walked away. No context, no mention of 8 years and $186,000. No mention of the word burden at Thanksgiving. My phone filled with voicemails. For a day, sometimes 5. You're killing your father. The church is praying for us. How can you do this to your own mother? I listened to each one exactly once. Then I opened a spreadsheet, columns for date, caller, timestamp, summary, emotional register, and logged every message with the same flat precision I'd used to audit an account. Then I deleted the voicemail. I didn't call anyone back. On the 5th day, Garrett called, first time in 3 years. His voice was tightly wound, like someone holding a phone and an ultimatum at the same time. You need to come home and fix this. Fix what? Everything. Mom is falling apart, Dad can't sleep, the bank keeps calling. Sounds like a family problem. Garrett, your family. Am I? Because at Thanksgiving, Mom called me a burden. You laughed. Dad stared at his plate. That doesn't sound like family to me. He hung up. I added him to the spreadsheet. December 14th. Duration 2 minutes. Tone aggressive, content, demands without offers. Every quarter I pulled my credit report. Professional habit, not paranoia. When you're a CPA, your credit score is part of your credentials. Clients trust you with their finances. I checked mine the second week of January. I scrolled through the familiar entries. Student loan paid, car loan paid, credit utilization at 9%. And then I stopped. A new account, a mortgage, $47,000, secured by residential property at 814 Maple Drive, Millfield, Pennsylvania. My name was on it. Sloan A. Jurgens. I hadn't signed a mortgage in my life. I hadn't walked into a bank, spoken to a loan officer, or sat across from a notary. I hadn't agreed to anything. But there it was, my name, my social security number, my credit history, attached to a second mortgage on a house I didn't own for a loan I had never requested. My credit score had dropped 38 points. I sat back, steadied my hands, took a screenshot, saved the full report as a PDF, created a new folder on my desktop and named it 814 Maple, opened a fresh spreadsheet. Column A date, column B source, column C finding, column D action taken. First entry January 12th. Equifax credit report. Unauthorized mortgage $47,000, $814 Maple Drive. Screenshot saved, PDF archived. Someone had used my identity to take out a loan, and there was only one address that loan was tied to. I called Valley First Credit Union the next morning. A loan officer named Janet was courteous and careful. She confirmed my identity, then told me the application had been submitted in person with a notarized signature. 5 days later, a manila envelope arrived. I spread the documents across my kitchen table under the reading lamp, the one I used for late-night freelance work, and went through every page methodically. The application was thorough. Someone who knew me had filled it out, my employer, my income, my address, except the address listed was 814 Maple Drive, not my apartment. I found the signature on page 11. At first glance, it was close, very close, but I sign my name over 100 times a month on tax returns and client correspondence. I know my handwriting the way a carpenter knows the grain of a specific wood. The S in my signature curves left, has always curved left, since Mrs. Patterson's cursive lessons at Millfield Elementary School in 3rd grade. This S curved right. Below it, a notary stamp. Darren Holt, Notary Public, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I knew that name. Darren Holt had been in Garrett's class at Millfield High. They'd played on the same JV football team, the one Garrett got cut from. Darren had a notary office on Main Street, right next to the hardware store. I set the document down and picked up my phone. Rita, I need a lawyer, not a tax attorney, a criminal one. My boss, Rita, was quiet for a moment. This is about your family, isn't it? It's about a forged signature on a $47,000 federal loan document. I'll make a call tonight. Alan Marsh had an office in Lancaster, 35 minutes east. He was in his 50s, gray at the temples, desk covered in yellow legal pads, a mug reading due process. Rita had trusted him for 15 years. I sat across from him with the mortgage application, my credit report, and my CPA license, all three side by side. He studied them for 10 minutes without a word. Then he leaned back. Clean case, forgery, identity theft, bank fraud. If you want to press charges, this is federal territory. What happens to the loan? You file an identity theft report with the FTC, dispute the account with all three credit bureaus, and the bank opens an investigation. The loan gets flagged. 60 to 90 days for resolution. In the house. He paused. If the second mortgage was fraudulent, the bank unwinds it. But if the first mortgage also defaults, the one you were paying, the property enters foreclosure. It will default. I stopped paying. Alan looked at me with the expression of a man who understood arithmetic and had no judgment about the person delivering it. Then the house goes to auction, probably within 6 months. I nodded. That afternoon, I filed an identity theft report with the FTC from my laptop. I placed a credit freeze with all three bureaus. I mailed a certified dispute letter to Valley First Credit Union with my real signature at the bottom. Then I made dinner, grilled cheese, tomato soup, and ate it alone on my couch. 60 to 90 days. I could wait. I'd been waiting 32 years. Alan's investigation moved faster than expected. The bank had its own liability to protect. A fraudulent notarization was a problem for Valley First as much as for me. Within 3 weeks, they traced the $47,000. It had been wired to a business checking account registered to G&H Ventures LLC. G for Garrett, H for Holt. The disbursement records arrived in a manila envelope. I read them at my kitchen table with a pencil and a legal pad. $18,000 went toward a down payment on a vacant rural lot in Berks County, a parcel that had since dropped 40% in value after a failed rezoning application. $22,000 went to a Ford F-150 registered to Garrett, listed in the LLC records as a company vehicle. The remaining $7,000 was categorized as operating expenses. Alan obtained the bank statements for those operating expenses. 2 trips to Las Vegas, flights and hotels. 6 restaurant dinners in Philadelphia, none under $100. A gaming console with 3 controllers. A monthly cigar subscription. My brother had stolen $47,000 using my identity and spent it on a depreciating truck, worthless land, and vacations I would never take. I didn't slam the table. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my pencil and added each line item to the spreadsheet. Column A, item. Column B, amount. Column C, source. Column D, status. When I finished, I closed my laptop and washed my mug. My brother had used my name, the same name that had signed 312 checks keeping that family afloat, to fund a lifestyle built on borrowed time and stolen credit. And Linda still called him the pride of the family. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time that night, the mortgage application spread flat under the lamp, my CPA license beside it. 2 signatures, 2 versions of my name, 2 completely different hands. The real one, practiced, consistent, the S looping left the way it had since I was 9 years old. The forged one, shaped right, spaced close, but ultimately a performance by someone who had seen my signature 100 times and never once understood the hand behind it. I thought about all 312 checks I'd sent voluntarily over 8 years, each one signed with my real signature, each one cashed without comment, without thanks, without acknowledgement. Nobody in my family had ever studied those signatures. Nobody had held one up to the light or thought carefully about the person writing them. But this forgery, this failed imitation, was the first time my signature had ever mattered to them. Not the real ones. Not the ones that kept the furnace running and Frank's medications covered and the roof from leaking. The fake one. The one worth $47,000 in fraudulent loan proceeds. That was the signature they needed. I folded the application back into its envelope, placed it in the 814 maple folder, and slid it into my desk drawer. Then I turned off the lamp, brushed my teeth, and went to bed. I didn't dream. I rarely do. But I woke up the next morning at 5:15 with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not grief. Arithmetic. Rita and I sat in a corner booth at Calhoun's Diner on Main Street. She had a club sandwich. I had coffee and chicken noodle soup. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to let the system work. The FTC report is filed. The bureaus are investigating. Alan is handling the bank, and I'm done." Done with what? All of it, the checks, the holidays, the phone calls, the voicemail spreadsheet. 8 years of being someone's financial infrastructure while they introduced me to the pastor as fine. Rita stirred her iced tea. "In the house. The house is going to default, then it's going to auction." She looked at me. I looked at her. Rita built Harper and Webb from a folding table in her garage. She knew what it meant to construct something from nothing while people waited for you to fail. "My mother was right about one thing," I said. "I was a burden, just not the kind she meant. I was the burden holding everything up, and I put it down." Rita nodded once, slowly. "She didn't say good for you. She didn't say I'm proud of you. She said, finish your soup. We have 3 new clients this week." My checking account, for the first time in 8 years, stayed where it was at the end of the month. I opened an investment account, a simple index fund, nothing complicated. I bought a real sofa to replace the second-hand one with the spring that had poked through the left cushion since my first apartment. I signed up for a Tuesday-Thursday yoga class at the community center in Lancaster. I'd never done yoga before. Turns out I liked it. Rita brought me 3 new bookkeeping clients. My freelance income climbed by $22,000 a year, and I did something I'd been considering for months. I registered an LLC with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Jurgens and Associates Consulting. $125 for the filing fee. When the certificate of formation arrived, I framed it and hung it above my desk. It was the first document with my name on it I'd ever been proud to display. My first real family portrait, in a way. Meanwhile, 25 minutes west, 814 Maple Drive was quietly deteriorating. The grass grew tall because Frank couldn't push a mower, and Garrett claimed to be too busy. The utility company cut power for a week before Frank paid the bill himself from his disability check. The porch light went dark. A bracket on the flag holder came loose, and nobody fixed it. Pauline Oates found me at the Wawa on a Saturday morning in late February. She was 72, barely 5 feet tall, and had lived next door to the Jurgens' house for 31 years. She put her hand on my arm near the Creamer station. "Your mother has been telling people you abandoned them, that you stopped caring." I stirred my coffee and didn't respond. "But I've watched you, Sloan, every Saturday morning for years, pulling into that driveway with grocery bags. I saw you mowing that lawn in July when it was 95 degrees and your father couldn't stand up straight. I saw you carry that turkey up those steps every Thanksgiving since you were 23. She squeezed my arm. "I know what you did for that family, and I know what they did to you. Millfield is 4,000 people. Memories run long here." The dots were connecting without me saying a word. In late March, Valley First Credit Union filed a notice of trustees sale with the county recorder. Foreclosure auction, 30 days. The letter arrived at 814 Maple Drive on a Wednesday. Linda read it standing at the kitchen counter. Frank told me later, months later, that she sat down in the same kitchen chair and didn't move for 2 hours. The house was a 1987 four-bedroom, 1.5 bath on Maple Drive. The kitchen where Linda used to bake Garrett's birthday cakes, always chocolate, always with his name in blue frosting. The living room where the family Christmas photo was taken every year. 3 people, smiling, never 4. Market value, roughly $180,000. Outstanding first mortgage, $94,000. Outstanding second mortgage, Garrett's fraud, $47,000. The math was brutal and only getting worse. Linda called me one final time. No scripture, no accusations, no rising vocal pitch. Just a voice I didn't recognize from her, flat, small, emptied out. Please. I can't help you, Mom. You mean you won't? I mean I can't. You made sure of that at Thanksgiving. A long silence. I could hear the kitchen clock in the background, the rooster-shaped one that had hung on the wall since I was 6. You'll regret this, she said. But the words had no force behind them. She was saying them because she had nothing else left. I hung up, set my phone on the counter, looked at the framed LLC certificate on my wall. Jurgens and Associates Consulting. Then I called Alan Marsh. Who can bid at a foreclosure auction? I asked. Anyone, individuals, LLCs, corporations, cash or certified funds. It's a public sale. Can my LLC bid? He set down his pen. Jurgens and Associates Consulting. He studied me for a moment. Legally, yes. The LLC is a separate entity. Its own EIN, its own operating account, its own standing. Sharing a surname with the former owners isn't disqualifying. What's the likely minimum bid? He pulled comparable sales. Foreclosure properties in rural Pennsylvania were moving at 60 to 70 cents on the dollar. You're looking at 110 to 125,000. I opened my laptop on his desk. Personal savings, 89,000. 8 years of living lean and investing steady. LLC business account, 45,000. Freelance income I'd been routing to the company since registration. Rita had offered to advance my year-end bonus, 8,000. Total liquid assets, $142,000. Alan looked at the screen, looked at me. You can do this. I know, I've been running this math since Thanksgiving. He leaned back. When you buy that house, if you buy it, what are you going to do with it? Something my mother never did. Which is? Make it a place where people feel welcome. He picked up his pen. I'll register the LLC as a bidder, bring a cashier's check the morning of. We shook hands. It was the most professional handshake of my life and the most personal. Garrett came to my apartment on a Sunday evening. No call, no text, just a fist hammering on my door hard enough to rattle the chain lock. I opened it with the chain still on. Through the 3-inch gap, unshaved, red-eyed, wearing the same Thanksgiving hoodie. You need to drop the FTC report. If they keep investigating, I'm going to prison, Sloan, federal charges. You committed identity theft and bank fraud, Garrett. Those are federal crimes. I'm your brother's. You're a stranger who shares my parents. He shifted, tried a different angle, the pivot, the charm, the thing that had always worked on Linda and never once worked on me. I'll pay you back, every dollar, I just need time. With what income, the food truck that never launched, the crypto losses, the lot in Berks County that lost 40% of its value. His jaw tightened, the charm evaporated, and what was underneath it was what had always been underneath it, a man who genuinely believed he was owed things he hadn't earned. If you don't drop this, I'll tell everyone you're the reason Mom and Dad are losing the house. They already think that. Mom's been saying exactly that for weeks. He opened his mouth, closed it, nothing useful came out. I looked at him through the gap. My brother, 3 years older, 3 inches taller, and a lifetime behind me in every way that mattered. Good night, Garrett. I closed the door, turned the deadbolt, fastened the chain, sat back down on my real sofa with the financial planning book I'd bought at the library sale. Behind me, I heard him standing in the hallway for another 30 seconds, then footsteps toward the stairwell. My phone rang at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Frank. Sloan, his voice was low. Wind on his end, he was outside on the porch waiting for Linda to sleep. I know you're angry, I know why. I said nothing, the silence was his to fill. I should have said something at that table. I should have said something a long time ago. Still nothing from me. Your mother, she had a hard life after you were born. She gave up her job at the equipment dealership. She was the best salesperson in the county, and she walked away because we couldn't afford daycare for 2 kids. She never got past that. That's her story, Dad, not mine. I know, a long pause, wind picking up. You deserved better than that dinner, better than all of it. Silence. But you can't let the house go, Sloan. It's everything we have. There it was. Not an apology in service of something else. The right words wrapped around the wrong request, an acknowledgement calibrated to keep the money flowing. Good night, Dad. Sloan. Good night. I hung up, pulled the blanket over myself, stared at the ceiling. Just before he'd said, but in that half-second between I know and the ask, I'd heard something I'd never heard from him before. It might have been genuine regret. It might have been the wind. Just before the call ended, barely audible, "Don't tell your mother I called." He loved me, I believe that honestly, but he loved his own quiet more than he ever loved me out loud. 60 days after Thanksgiving, Valley First Credit Union mailed a notice of default to 814 Maple Drive. 90 days to cure or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Linda left 11 voicemails in a single day. I logged them all. 9 a.m., please call me. We got a letter from the bank. 10:15, this is serious. Your father is very upset. 11:30, you're destroying this family. 1 p.m., God will judge you for this. He sees everything. 3:45, voice cracking. I wish I never had you. Same spreadsheet, same columns, same flat methodology. Date, caller, messages, emotional arc, pleading to accusatory to theological to raw grief. Then a different call caught my attention. Garrett. His voice wasn't angry, it was shaking. Hey, about that second loan on the house, the one from Valley First. We should probably talk about that. I understood immediately. Garrett wasn't afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of what the bank would uncover when they investigated the second mortgage. If they found the forgery, they'd find Darren Holt. If they found Darren, they'd find G&H Ventures. If they found the LLC, they'd find the disbursements, the truck, the Vegas trips, the gaming console, the cigar club. Talk to your lawyer, Garrett. I hung up. He didn't call again for 6 weeks. And Darren Holt received a certified letter from the Pennsylvania Department of State informing him that his notary commission was under formal review. He called Garrett that afternoon. I'm not covering for you anymore. Figure it out yourself. The county courthouse steps were cold on the morning of the auction. Late April in Pennsylvania, 38 degrees, gray sky, the kind of morning where your breath clouds and disappears before you finish a sentence. I arrived at 8:45. Navy blazer, hair tied back, manila envelope tucked under my arm. Alan Marsh walked beside me in a charcoal suit carrying his briefcase and bitter paddle number 14. We didn't speak. Everything had already been said in his office. I scanned the crowd, 50. Maybe 20 people gathered on the steps. Investors in fleece vests with clipboards, a few neighbors. Mrs. Oates stood near the flagpole in her green wool coat and gave me a single nod. Pastor Juan stood at the edge of the group, hands in his pockets, watching. And then I saw them. Frank leaning against the iron railing, one hand on it, the other pressed against his lower back. He was wearing his old canvas work jacket with the torn pocket that had never been mended. Linda stood beside him in the burgundy wool coat, the one I'd bought her 3 Christmases ago. Her hair was done. Her lipstick was on. Even at the end, she dressed for an audience. Garrett hung back near the parking meters, hood up, arms crossed, not making eye contact with anyone. The auctioneer Wheeze Pratt, a county clerk, set up a small podium at the top of the steps. Good morning. We are here for the public auction of Lot 47, residential property located at 814 Maple Drive, Millfield, Dauphin County. Opening bid, $95,000. Allen raised paddle 14. An investor in a fleece vest opened at 95. A woman behind him pushed to 98. The first investor countered at 101. Allen raised our paddle, 105, steady voice, no urgency, like ordering lunch. The woman dropped out at 108. The investor pushed to 110, then 112. Allen, 114. The investor checked his phone, typed something, looked up. 114.50. I touched Allen's arm, our prearranged signal. 118,000. Allen's voice carried clean across the courthouse steps. The investor in the vest looked at his phone one more time, shook his head, and slid it into his pocket. Going once, Pratt said, at 118,000. Silence. Going twice. No paddles. Sold to bidder number 14, Jurgens and Associates Consulting LLC. The name hit the air like a struck bell. Linda's head snapped up. She turned, scanning the crowd, eyes moving fast. Jurgens, she knew that name. Garrett stepped off the curb. What who? Frank didn't move. He stood at the railing, staring at the courthouse steps, reading something only he could see. Allen stepped toward the clerk's table. Linda pushed through two people to reach him. Who is that who bought our house? My client, Allen said. The owner of Jurgens and Associates Consulting. Jurgens, that's our name. Who? And I stepped forward from behind Allen. Into the space between my lawyer and my mother. Navy blazer, hair tied back, manila envelope in my left hand. Hello, Mom. Linda stared at me. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The burgundy coat seemed to pull tight across her shoulders, or maybe she was pulling herself inward. You bought our house. Jurgens and Associates Consulting purchased this property at a public foreclosure auction. Legally, with documented funds. Money I earned over 8 years. I held up the envelope. Every payment verified, every dollar accounted for. I'm an accountant, Mom, it's what I do. Garrett shoved through two people and planted himself 3 feet in front of me. You can't do this, that's our home. You can't buy someone else's home. I didn't buy someone's home. I bought a foreclosed property the same way any bidder here could have. The difference is I know every crack in that foundation. I'm the one who paid to patch them. Linda's voice climbed. After everything we did for you. What did you do for me? Not yelling, not accusing. Asking, the way you'd ask someone to clarify an invoice. Name one thing, Mom. One. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. I'll name some things I did. 312 mortgage payments, 8 years of health insurance for Dad, utilities every month, property tax twice a year, $186,000, from the daughter you called a burden at your own Thanksgiving table. The crowd had gone still. Mrs. Oates had her hand over her mouth. Pastor Juan had taken off his glasses. You said I was always a burden, I continued. A burden doesn't write 312 checks. A burden doesn't have $118,000 in a cashier's check. A burden doesn't build an LLC and buy a house at auction. Garrett lunged. Frank grabbed his arm, faster than I'd seen Frank move in years. Give it back, Garrett's voice was breaking. That's our house, you can't take it. I didn't take it, you lost it. With a forged signature, a fraudulent notary, and $47,000 you spent on a truck and 2 trips to Las Vegas. Garrett stopped pulling. His face went white. Linda made a sound, not words, just sound. Raw and shapeless and rising, the noise of a narrative collapsing. A security guard stepped forward. Garrett stared at the ground. Frank closed his eyes, 2 tears ran down his face. He didn't wipe them, he just stood at the railing with his son's arm in his grip, and his eyes shut, like a man standing in weather he couldn't get out of. I pulled a single page from the manila envelope and held it up so the crowd could see. This property will be renovated and converted into a community resource center for women and families in crisis. The facility will offer transitional housing, financial literacy workshops, legal aid referrals, and family counseling services. I looked up. It will be called the Millfield Family Center. I folded the page and slid it back into the envelope. This house was never a home to me, but it's going to be a home for people who actually need one. Mrs. Oates stepped forward from the crowd. I'd like to volunteer. Then Harold Gregg. Then Martha Benton from church. Then a woman I didn't recognize. I learned later her name was Denise, a mother of 3 who had left an abusive partner the year before. The crowd had shifted. It wasn't around Linda anymore. It was around me. Frank stayed after everyone else had gone. He stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, watching me the way you'd watch a plane take off, knowing it was going somewhere you couldn't follow. I walked over, we stood facing each other. You bought the house. Yes. To help people. Yes. He nodded slowly, reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old, yellowed, soft at the creases. Found this in the attic last week. Was going to throw it out before the bank came. He handed it to me. I unfolded it. My state mathematics competition certificate, first place, 8th grade, the night nobody celebrated. He'd kept it for 18 years. I was proud of you, he said. I want you to know that. I looked at the certificate, looked at him. Goodbye, Dad. I folded it and slid it into the inside pocket of my blazer, close to my chest. Walked to my car without looking back. Sitting in the driver's seat with the engine running and a deed in my name, I thought about the phrase Frank had used on the phone all those weeks ago. Ask your pride and joy. He'd meant Garrett, but sitting there, I realized the phrase had always been wrong in his hands. Nobody in that family had been my pride. Nobody had been my joy. Those things were mine now, and they had been for a while. I just hadn't stopped moving long enough to notice. I put the car in drive. 3 months passed. The legal system moved forward with its characteristic absence of drama. Garrett was charged with identity theft and bank fraud. He took a plea, 18 months of probation, a permanent felony conviction, and full restitution of $47,000 to be paid over 5 years through garnished wages from the warehouse job he finally had to take. $12 an hour. Loading pallets at a distribution center outside Lancaster. No business cards. Darren Holt lost his notary commission permanently. $5,000 fine, barred from reapplying. Linda and Frank moved out of 814 Maple Drive 2 weeks after the auction. Linda's sister Carol took them in. Carol asked them to leave after 2 months. They moved into a 1-bedroom rental in Lancaster. Frank lived on disability. Linda took a part-time job at a fabric store cutting material, working a register. Her first paying job in 26 years. The house on Maple Drive was gutted and rebuilt over the summer. $50,000 from the LLC. $40,000 from a county community development grant I'd applied for. $10,000 from Rita, who wrote a personal check the day I told her the renovation plans had been approved. New walls, new floors, new paint. A reception desk in the front room where the Thanksgiving table used to stand. 4 transitional housing units upstairs where the bedrooms had been. A meeting room in the basement, Garrett's old space. The Millfield Family Center opened the following March. I stood in the front room and looked around. The walls were light gray, not the dark paneling Linda had refused to change for 30 years. The floors were new oak laminate, clean and level. Above the reception desk, a banner. Everyone deserves a place at the table. Mrs. Oates cut the ribbon with kitchen shears she'd brought from home. Because nobody had thought to buy ceremonial scissors. Pastor Juan offered a short blessing. Rita took photos on her phone. 47 volunteers had signed the sheet. I knew the exact number. I kept a spreadsheet. 20 minutes after the ribbon cutting, a young woman named Maria walked in. 2 children with her, a boy around 4, a girl around 6. She asked quietly about transitional housing. I sat down with her at the reception desk, pulled out the intake forms, and started asking questions. Name, current living situation, number of dependents, emergency contact. Same methodology I'd use for a client's tax intake. Same calm, same precision. But different. Because this time the numbers meant shelter. They meant someone sleeping in a bed tonight instead of a car. I glanced at the wall, where the 3-person Christmas photo used to hang. In its place, a framed copy of the center's mission statement, signed by every volunteer. 47 signatures, all real. Here is what I know now that I didn't know at 14. Standing in a kitchen that smelled like Gino's Pizza, while a trophy sat unnoticed on the counter. The heaviest thing you can carry isn't someone else's mortgage. It isn't someone else's pride, or their narrative, or their curated version of who you are to them. It's the belief, quiet, persistent, installed so early you forget it came from somewhere, that you owe your entire life to people who have never once said thank you. That's where my story ends. And where the Millfield Family Center begins. 312 checks, 1 forged signature, a Thanksgiving napkin folded into a fan that no one ever noticed. If you've ever been the one holding everything together quietly, the one they forgot to thank, you already know what matters. You already know who you are. Share this story, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Calm Drama Stories. We'll see you next time.